We're ready to go, Alan.
You ready to go?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody in? Okay, great. Welcome everybody. This is the Individual Advancement Program FY21 Printmaking and Books panel. This is a public meeting of the Indiana Arts Commission. I just said that Individual Advancement Program Fiscal Year 2021 Grant Review Panel. I'm Alan Platt, Commissioner from Floyd's Knobs. Today is April 15th, and we are meeting by conference call and streaming live from a video or webinar. We welcome applicants and other guests who may be listening in today and would like to remind you that you are muted for this review. There is no direct contact or conversation about the evaluation and disposition of applications before, during, or after the panel meeting. At this time, we would like the panelists and staff to introduce themselves, stating their name, occupation, and where they are from in the state. I'll call your name and then just share that information with all of us. Frank.
Hey, I'm Frank Lewis Allen. I'm from Fort Wayne. I'm an illustrator and an artist using various mediums.
Thank you. Sujata?
Hi, I'm Sujata Gopalan. I am a printmaker and painter, and currently teach at Indiana State University, and I live in Terre Haute, Indiana.
Welcome. Buffy?
I am Buffy Rogers, and I am a printmaker and bookmaker, and I live in Battleground, Indiana.
And Sarah? Sarah, you're still muted.
How's that? Hi,
Very good. Thank you.
Sarah. I'm a printmaker, book artist, and paper maker, and an art teacher, and I live in Indianapolis, and I'm excited to be here with you.
Thanks. Jay?
I'm Jay Weinberg. I am a painter, and I am actually a founder of a startup called Artunity that creates the opportunity for artists to collect donations for a chance to, for their supporters, for a chance to win original art. So, and I'm from Valparaiso originally, and I live in LaPorte now.
Anna?
Anna Trageser, IAC staff.
Chapin?
Chapin Schnick, IAC staff.
Okay. Now we'll begin the panel review. This is how the process will work. I will announce the application and ask the first reader to begin the discussion. The first reader will provide their assessment of the application based upon evaluation criteria and their perspective. Panelists, please note that the applications do not need to be recapped since everyone has already read it. Just provide your comments. After the first reader is finished, I will ask the second reader to present any new, additional, or opposing comments. We are not looking for consensus, just a full evaluation of the different perspectives panelists bring to the table. After the second reader has finished, I'll open up for discussion for final comments. Remember, in the interest of time, we are only looking for new, additional, or opposing viewpoints. If a panelist has a conflict of interest, the panelist will be asked or placed on hold while the application is reviewed. Finally, once the application has been reviewed by the full panel, we ask the panel to update their scores in the online system. It is common for scores to change as a result of this broader discussion. These are saved automatically. So before we proceed from there, are there any questions? Just as an additional reminder, remember to stay on mute as when you're not presenting, but when you want to join in, please unmute, and we'll make sure we give you time. So if you're having trouble, maybe give a wave at the camera, panelists, just so we know you're trying to get in. Obviously, there are some challenges in doing the streaming, and we appreciate all your efforts and working through some of those issues. Okay, well, let's begin.
Sorry, Alan.
Oh, go ahead.
A couple things that I forgot to mention. We are missing a panelist today, and so where Grace is listed as first reader, The second reader will serve as first reader instead. And where Grace is listed as second reader, we will just open up to the rest of the panel for discussion. And please, panelists, if you would please be generous with your comments with any applicants that have Grace listed as first or second reader, so that we make sure we hear from, panelists, given that she's not here. So please speak up, provide comments on those. Secondly, if it's okay, Alan, it'd be good to take a break about halfway through the applications, about 5-minute break.
Absolutely.
Okay. And if anyone needs a
that.
break before that, please speak up and we'll be happy to.
Great, thanks, Anna. Okay, we'll get started with the application FY21 IAP Brody. The first reader is Buffy.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah,
Yes,
great.
ma'am.
Oh, okay, all right. All right, so when I was looking at Rebecca Brody's visual arts video demonstration of art lessons, creating teaching videos are a logical progression for Brody's artistic career. It's laudable that she would want to pass on her knowledge of techniques in a form that's easily reviewed by her students. The fact that she already has a technical assistant to help her in the filming of the videos and choosing equipment shows adequate planning. Placing them online, free to the public, is commendable. I know that she did mention also that she would be paid at some point through her videos, but I'm not sure how far down in her work that would happen. Her description of techniques is interesting and different than general knowledge of watercolor techniques. And collaboration with electronics and a tech-savvy individual will enable her to fulfill her promised videos. I had to go to her Facebook and web browser page to see her work. There was only one image in the application, and that was of some lily pads, I think. She did have a list of images, but so anyway, engaging the public online through her online videos will be one way of interacting on a large scale, generally open to a large demographic. She plans on teaching a UPO, which is a kind of material, a painting surface, in the art museum classroom. Provides two ways of intersecting with a specific group of interested students as opposed to, say, general public. Continuing after with technical knowledge gained will continue to benefit others online while teaching the videos, doing the teaching videos. And perhaps a short of her teaching in the classroom during her online videos would show more public interaction where that's lacking. And then through the learning curve, though it may be steep with the technical part of it, the artist has taught herself new techniques and grown over her career as an artist, and with the technical help of her assistant and others in her community and practice, she can make it happen. So that was my spiel.
Thank you, Buffy. Jay is our second reader.
Yeah, I thought, in the things that I definitely concur with, it's amazing how long she's been an artist. And I definitely believe that video, it can go a really long way. I mean, obviously that's the kind of time that we're living in. The things that I was cautioning against, though, is the kind of, if you build, because I have a lot of experience in this space, to build it, if you build it, they will come mentality. I think that there just needs to be a lot of time put into how that target market's going to be found, and then even how the videos will be produced. Like sometimes even stuff shot on a cell phone camera just works, I mean, and most people have a cell phone. So the other parts that I was saying is that I think we need a little bit more information on, do they have a format? How long will they be? Is there intro and outro? What kind of music? Because knowing that I produced a lot of this stuff, are there segments? Is the studio space where they're going to be recorded all there and all that kind of stuff? But again, there's a huge potential for it to reach a large market for sure with a lot of people. But I think that, that kind of strategy needs to be kind of gone over to And I like the notion of the exchange between viewers. That's something that's good, but that's why I like doing live broadcasts could even be put into potentially the idea. And I do know that the learning curve is steep, as was just said, that, you know, especially the video and recording production can take some time to master, so that they should definitely be patient. But the other part that I felt could have been a little bit stronger on the equipment costs. There really wasn't anything there. I mean, like, what kind of cameras are we currently looking at? What programs are going to be used for production? What's the lighting rigs? Have we looked at lighting rigs? So I think even if there was just a little bit of a suggestion of like, oh, these are a couple of the cameras that we're looking at, or these are the lighting rigs, because that would also, if I were going one-on-one, I would say, well, these particular rigs could work better for your lights, and you could just use your cell phone camera and get more, you know, more bang for your buck in that regard. So, but overall, I think the video idea is fantastic, and especially for someone that advanced in their career, it would be really cool to make those two things converge if possible.
Great, thanks, Jay. Are there any additional different comments from the rest of the panel? Okay, hearing none. If you will go ahead and finalize your scores on this first application. Okay, does anybody need additional time? Okay, we're going to move on then to application number 2, FY21 IAP Cole. Sujata is our first reader.
Hi, good morning. So Ms. Cole wants to use the grant to create a book of her work. And she's a late career artist. She says she's been working for more than 40 years. I think one of the things that I had, first of all, she has been working for a long time, and she seems to have an extensive body of work. I guess one of the things that I was unsure about is whether this book intends to be some sort of retrospective, and that is not particularly articulated. One of the issues that I had, and the idea of making a book of your work, I think, especially for someone that has been active for over 40 years, is a great idea. And I fully support the idea of doing that. I had a little issue with the documentation of the work. Again, because of the way the works were formatted in the application, it was very difficult to get an idea of what they really look like. The images were very small. And another thing is that she works and lives in Bloomington and is quite active in the art center down there. I have some questions about the community engagement part of the application. I'm not sure that the articulation of how the book will impact the community is a little bit vague, and I think the application could be stronger if the artist could expound on how the creation of this book would impact the community and how she plans on engaging the community with its production. Another thing about the budget, I think we were talking about before, the cost of how to put a book together is not really well articulated. I think that if I could have a little bit more information about where it would be published, how it would be put together, how many number of pages, images, et cetera, would give a bit of a clearer idea of how that budget piece works in with the rest of the proposal. So those are my comments. I would personally like a few more specifics about publishing, and I would really love some better images to go along with this application.
Okay, thank you. Our second reader is Frank.
Oh, yeah. I had similar thoughts about the community engagement. It was a little bit vague, but then on the other hand, the venue's obviously there to do these talks and workshops and things, even though there wasn't a lot of detail on them really. So, and about the point of the feasibility with the publishing, there's a lot of avenues to publish. There's not much detail on how they're going to publish, but I think the budget is adequate for her needs to publish. I mean, I've self-published, and it seems okay to me. I was more worried at first about the design, how much that's going to cost, but then I realized she's got a friend who's willing to do that, and she outlined that in the proposal. I think it's a great idea. I mean, even younger artists like me think, well, what would happen if there was a change of circumstance and suddenly I couldn't hold on to all my artwork? So having it in the book is a fantastic idea, and for any artist really. And it instantly gives you like something to show to a contact that you come across, because in the art community you do come across contacts everywhere. So I like the proposal. I think on the whole, it covered the points pretty well. The artist obviously has a good background in art, and so shouldn't have much trouble.
Okay, thank you, Frank. Open it up to the rest of the panel for any additional or different comments.
I would echo for sure the notion of that if the presentation of the images were like on my notes taken, you know, a little bit more professionally and cropped similarly in the same resolution, because that's how it's going to come through in the book, I'm sure anyway. So it would definitely be beneficial in that regard to have that there.
Okay, thank you.
And
any other comments?
One more thing, and as much passion
yeah.
about growing outside of Indiana, especially when we're looking at something for inside of Indiana. There seem to be, like, obviously any artist wants to go to the highest levels that they can, but I think this being so focused on Indiana, we need a little bit more information, as was said, about how we can make a bigger impact in Indiana first.
Okay.
Any
other comments? Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Buffy. My comment is along Jay's lines. I've had people submit things to shows that were in low resolution, and when they went to print them, it was a problem, especially if the work is no longer accessible to her. She's going to have a difficulty coming up with that a high resolution image to publish in a book. And since she's been painting for over 40 years, she may want to include some of those images, and that makes it really difficult to get that higher resolution image.
Okay. All right. There's no different or additional comments. We'll go ahead and finalize our scores.
Y'all are doing a great job. Excellent comments from everyone. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to move on to Application 3, FY21 IAP Frank. Sarah is our first reader.
Hi, this is the application for the textile artist doing tie-dye on textiles and wanting to take the one-week workshop at Aramont School of Arts and Crafts. I love the idea of any artist continuing to support their practice by studying with new artists and taking new classes that will give them new information and new techniques. There was a lot of superfluous information in this workshop, which clouded my ability to really see what the overall goal was, and perhaps the overall goal, obviously, in taking the class. So that part was good. The community engagement aspect, I'm very much in support of arts being shared in unusual places. So one of the ways that this artist, her discussion of having an interactive large piece made at the farmer's market where different people could come and add to a large textile with her new printmaking techniques that she'll learn at the workshop. I think that's a lovely idea. It'll be presented on social media, which has a large reach, and also at her booth in a large candle company. What I liked about that is that it has perhaps a less fine art focused audience, whereas work in a gallery, there's a kind of a particular audience that goes to art galleries, whereas people going to the candle company off of Interstate 70 seems it would certainly be a different audience. And that I really support as well, so that we can get the arts out to as many people in our community as possible. A couple of the concerns I had are the congruence between the taking of the workshop and her discussion of her future interaction with the community. So aside from the large textile being on display, I was unclear on how this artist will interact with the audience, and perhaps the being open to the public is sufficient, although I was confused on that level of sufficiency for the grantors. And then finally, my other confusion lied in the numbers. And although the numbers added up according to the questions in the evaluations, there was a mention of her applying to the scholarship from Aramont itself and receiving the $600 to take the class, and then the money from the grant was also being asked to pay for the class. So I understand how that could be information the artist doesn't have in return yet. Perhaps she doesn't know if she's gotten the grant, etc. But I did have some confusion on how the numbers added up as far as how the funds would be utilized.
All right, thank you. Our second reader would have been Grace. She's not here, so any other comments from the panel?
This is Jay. I do like the interaction of the farmers market. It's one of the few that I felt actually had a really strong before the project type of interaction. That can be difficult. But I like the notion of getting kind of feedback, and again, as a person who's building something for the public with Artunity, it's like if I just try and build the thing that I'm building without anybody getting their hands on it, I could build the wrong thing. So I always think that that's important and very cool. One of the suggestions that I had, and it's this not maybe a little bit nitpicking, but on the budget side of things with the lodging, and I've put this in a couple of different things, so I'm just adding it now, that when we're looking at lodging, people should potentially look at an Airbnb. And this is just a suggestion. It's not a right or wrong thing. But, well, I guess in a sense that it could save you some of the resources, and you could do it for less. I'm used to being scrappy as an starving artist. So looking at Airbnbs for bringing your budget down and saving on costs. But the other thing is that you might be able to actually find artistically minded host that fits your theme, and then you wind up expanding your actual audience, because one person at a time we can reach the world. So I think anybody that's looking at lodging and where that's a factor going forward, Airbnb is something that they could potentially look into.
Okay, any other comments from the panel? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and finalize our scores. We'll move on to application number 4, FY21 IAP Johnson, Saragini. Let's see, Sujata, this is one that you have a conflict on, I think.
Yes.
Chapin, you're taking care of that, Chapin. Okay, our first reader is Jay.
Oh, I had to unmute myself. So Johnson's project involves the creation of 4 artist books in specially designed slip cases or boxes created in different media: ink, drawing, batik on paper, intaglio, woodcut, fine art prints. So my comments here, overall, I felt like it's thought through and well described, and pretty thorough on almost all accounts. Larger, again, this is a resolution thing. Once again, the larger resolution of images on the books and boxes on the application would have made it that much stronger, just to be able to get a more detailed look at things. But the artist is clearly engaged in the community and teaching, and with the proposed gallery exhibits. And the supplies appear to be researched and understood, making the case for the artist to be able to achieve these goals presented very plausible. So overall, I felt like this was a pretty strong application. And I didn't have a lot of suggestions on different things outside of pretty much the larger resolution on the images, just to help make things a little bit clearer.
Okay, thank you, Jay. Buffy, our second reader.
Okay, I really enjoyed looking at Sarojini's work. She describes the complexity of her techniques, and her stuff is so beautifully articulated, and she's actually moving in a slightly different theme now. I enjoyed the fact that her content is interesting and contains a worldview as well as well-produced imagery and immaculate craftsmanship. I think that making the additions of 10 keeps it small enough that she can actually complete her project in the time period she's allowing herself. She's actually giving herself a lot of work to do, considering that prints are supposed to be exact and precisely the same each time. I think also, and something that Jay didn't mention, but her already described network of public events that she goes to and participates in, and interaction with the public, I think is already set up. So she's got this network of interaction with the public that a lot of people don't have in their grants, not enough interaction. So she's really conscious of that. I mean, her regular audience consists of college students and businesses where her work's displayed. But the whole idea of having openings on a regular basis and being there for interaction is really great. And since she's taught at the university for many years, I think that she's well aware of the expenses regarding her art supplies. So, and using her lab for the presses is also going to reduce what her costs are. So she's she's got a tremendous amount of work in her CVs. And I also think that it would be really nice if her images were a little cleaner. And I understand sometimes that artists don't want to publish their work in a really clean, high resolution image, but when you're applying for a grant, it's really, really important. And that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Okay, any additional or different comments from the panel?
Just have a comment. I'm not sure if it's relevant to say this here or later, but it's just making sure it's not something to do with the system. The fact that it seems to crop up a lot that the pictures are very small. Because I'm sure when they took these pictures, they were pretty good resolution nowadays.
Yeah, not that we're aware of.
Later.
We have not had that problem across the board, so don't believe so, but good
No,
point.
because I've seen images that are pretty standardly formatted and at high resolution within the applications, I'm pretty sure. So
Okay. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and finalize our scores on application number 4. And we will move on to application number 5. Is Sujata back?
Yes. I am.
Okay. Thank you. So application number 5, fiscal year 21 IAP Krentz. Grace was going to be the first reader, so Sujata will serve as our first reader.
Great. Just muted myself. Okay, so Krentz, this application is for the artist to attend a workshop in order to be able to come back and give classes in her community to adults. And I think that in and of itself is an admirable goal. One thing that was concerning was that the resume of the artist doesn't have any dates, so it's very difficult to discern her stage of development from either the resume or her documentation. There is a wide variety of work in the documentation, different kinds of work. One thing that was concerning there was that there isn't a list of medium sizes and dates. Again, I think the artist would benefit from being able to tell us, specifics about what that documentation means. I think the idea of going to do a workshop is, again, it's commendable, and I think the project is feasible. I'm not sure that attending a single workshop will allow her the mastery required to actually teach, so that was another concern of mine, was whether the actual grant is going to allow her to do what she wants to do. I think that this artist would benefit from a more concerted studio effort before actually applying for a grant again. I think she should definitely reapply, but in this particular instance, I am not sure that the application for doing what she wants to do really speaks to what the needs are and what her needs are. I do think that as far as the community engagement piece is concerned, she does, she does speak to the idea of engaging the community in the work. She has a space where she wants to do that. And so all of that, I think, is and she also wants to advertise on social media. So that part, I think, is well addressed.
Okay, thank you. Any additional comments from our panel?
Yes, yes. Sorry. Can you hear me? Oh, good. Sorry, I thought I was on mute and I couldn't figure out how to unmute it. It does say that she's an art teacher on her CV. and that she was for many years. So there would be some teaching experience there that would allow her to further interact with the new audience that she's hoping to engage.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments that are additional or different?
This is Buffy. Yes, my comment as regards that is that when you do take a class, and this is something I mentioned in my evaluation, was that you learn a technique from a teacher and you learn how that teacher taught that technique. And that is the benefit of taking the workshop. So if she can translate that and then put it forth to her students, that is going to be the key to the success of taking a workshop like that and transforming it into a workshop that somebody would want to take. And the Linda Kemp workshop deals with specifically abstract imagery and working with positive and negative space. So she has to take that information and translate that into her workshop and not try to take it back to a class and translate it into a workshop that has drawing and all this other stuff in it. She has to work with the basic things that are being offered there. And if she can do that, she can transform that information. But I agree that the background information is going to be super important to remember, that you have to teach by the technique that's being taught to you so that you can translate it and teach it to your students.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
One more thing to add, this is Jay. There'll be a common theme with some of these that want to use the internet and Facebook. Like, one of my questions is there a marketing budget to increase the potential audience reach outside of the regular Facebook posts? And not that necessarily marketing budgets always answer a problem, because you can get a lot of traction out of very, very specific posts that have some sort of a viral quotient in them. But just the notion that we're going to post it on Facebook, if you build it, they will come. I mean, there are workshops that a lot of these artists could take that are all just about, you know, how to use social media and how to properly market on, excuse me, on the internet. So I would say that anytime that we're looking at Facebook, and that we might want to A, consider a marketing budget, or B, know that just posting isn't going to bring people in droves. So it's something that we should really, really hunker down on, trying to articulate a plan and a strategy as it applies to using social media and the internet.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Buffy.
I think that she's talking about actually having a person-to-person, face-to-face class with people, as opposed to being on the internet. As I was reading, she was wanting to have a class at one time of the year, and then again repeating that class later on. And her classes would be held once a week for 6 weeks. So I wasn't sure where the internet part of that one came from, Jay. Sorry.
Well, because if you're going to reach people, how are you going to get the people into your class on the internet? I mean, there has to be a strategy to get those people. And if you're going to use the internet for, especially now, actually with where we're at, the current state of affairs of things, like, that's a brilliant idea, and it would work great for the situation we're in. But you have to be able to reach those people, to like, they have to have that awareness to be able to find your workshop or your class and everything else. So
Right, I understand that part. What I was saying is, she's doing it through a local library, and that's kind of an old-fashioned way of having a class. But I've taught in the libraries before they had the internet in common use, and they had a full group because it was a small town. library. And so people come in and they sign up for classes and do that kind of thing, or they get a grant, the library gets a grant to have the classes. So anyway.
Okay. So any other comments or difference than the ones that have already been shared? All right. Go ahead and finalize your scores for this one. The next application is FY21 IAP Meler. Frank is our first reader. Frank, you're muted.
Sorry. It sounds like the applicant has a good solid background in printmaking, and having this project, having these home facilities will allow her to really go full belt with that, because she'll have the time to actually use the press, because it can be very difficult sometimes needing to book and have just a short amount of time. You've got access to facilities. So I think this will advance her career. She seems to have a real, she's very enthusiastic to share this as well by her comments in the application, and that she's setting up this for the future to be able to have community engagement in a barn, which is great. And she also, I believe she, let's find the right section.
Okay.
Yeah, she's plans to exhibit and lecture, which is good. And I do believe she did say that she's got a network of people that are already interested, and she's got connections to people that want to learn this, which is good. She's blathering along a very specified avenue, which is great.
Excellent. Okay. Our second reader is Sarah.
Hi, I agree with the previous assessment. I think that this is well thought out, thorough. My comment is that she also mentions in at least 2 different places that she intends on communicating with her community to find out what their needs are, what they're interested in doing. She has her own goals of printmaking, etc., but she also intends on engaging her community to bring together, focused practice, engagement with one another, and what are their interests in having a community art space. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Any additional comments from the panel?
Yeah, I thought she was, this is Jay again, I thought she was extremely thorough, as has been said, and deepening her roots in Indiana. And I think that it shows well into the future, like her plans on how this can work out. And one of the things I thought would be good if she could, and maybe I missed it, like bring people in and tour the space and show ideas and interactions that might spring up from that, if they could come in a little bit earlier into the thing. But outside of that, I just thought everything was, I mean, down to links and the estimated cost of the materials being provided, that it was just very, very thorough.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else?
Go ahead, Bucky.
I also had a comment on her opening exhibit, lecture, and open house to share her work in her new studio is really cool. But the ongoing engagement from beginning to end. I didn't understand if it was required in the grant that there was this this engagement with a larger group of people, and she does want to engage adults, and I can understand that because they're going to be using her press. But she could facilitate going out to local area high schools to get these pre-adult kids who have some facility in doing a small workshop with a small group of dedicated kids who the art teacher might choose rather than say them just signing up for a class. And that would be engaging public education in her activities or in her public activities.
Thank you. All right. Let's go ahead and finalize our scores on this one. I think we'll do one more after this and then take a break. If that's okay with everyone. All right. Application number 7, FY21 IAP Oberreich. First reader is Buffy.
Okay. All right. When I looked at Kate's application, having already taken a cyanotype workshop and incorporated the technique into her paintings, I noticed that in what she was showing in her 10 images. She's planned an educational experience to expand her self-knowledge as an artist, with an artist established in that cyanotype medium particularly, and she's opening herself to additional new media through collaboration, and that's commendable. Preparing her space to work, teach, and collaborate will enhance her ability to engage the public. The insight gained from taking lessons is great, and it is 2 lessons in one when you have a good teacher. The same thing that applied to another artist, where you take a lesson, and in learning that lesson, you not only learn the technique, but you learn how to teach it. Saying you plan to have workshops would be more convincing than hope to offer workshops. The scope of a workshop is promising as it is opening up to artists and to others. Expanding the audience may be scarier than you want, but it's part of the teaching experience. Just as a little advice in that area, soliciting area teachers who may want to demo their classrooms would expand the public audience. Reviewing, just for the artist, if you would review access, equity, and geography, I think that would be helpful. But that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Buffy. Our second reader is Frank.
Yeah, it looks like she's very enthusiastic about teaching this particular process, and which is really good, and it's very specialized. It's good. So they were just good points.
Okay. Excellent. Any other comments from the panel? Oh, sorry, Frank, did you have anything else?
This is Jay that was about to speak.
Okay, thanks, Jay.
Yeah, the only thing that I thought everything was super solid and thorough. One of the things that I had in my notes was potentially that it could have been described what the method entails a little bit more, but more important than that is why your move to do it. Like, what was it that excited you about it, you know, and more of a story. I think a lot of times, and maybe that's just natural because of you're going through a grant process and you're thinking more of the what, but I always like to hear the why is really important. So I think with all applicants, and no matter what we're doing in life, if we can lead with our why, that can really solidify the what even stronger. So.
Okay, thank you. Other comments?
I'd only like to add 2. One is I love the idea that she's offering free workshops as she gains experience and practice and interaction with a new teaching group. And secondly, I recommended that she be more specific about who her target audience is and for who she is practicing the teaching. And, you know, in what way is she going to attract these students? Are they from a nearby school, community members, families, adults, children? Just for her own future plans of, you know, really getting into specifics will help her to have a more successful endeavor.
Thank you. Okay, any last comments? All right. All right, please finalize your scores on application number 7. When we finish those, we'll take a 5-minute break. Anna, any comments for the panel before we do that?
No, you're doing a great job. Excellent feedback, truly. We'll take 5 minutes. Let's meet back at 10:47, 10:48. Give you 6 minutes by my clock.
Okay. All right, we'll be back.
Thank you, Chapin. You're welcome. I'm going to get some food. Everybody doing okay? Do you have any questions?
If we have everybody back, I can see folks on the video. Sarah, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Thank you for checking.
Thank you. And Sujata?
I'm good to go.
Okay, great. Looks like we have everybody ready. We will go ahead and restart. We are on application number 8, FY21 IAP Rodriguez. Sujata, you are our first reader.
Okay. Let's see where to start. This application I thought was very well articulated. I think the goals of the project were clear and concise. There was a mention of exhibitions and workshops, but there were no specifics about where, you know, the work would be exhibited. So that was a little bit troubling. But I think overall the impetus of the project was well stated. The concept is well articulated as well. It's clear that the artist has a very specific point of view and he's able to create a consistent body of work. The images were a little dark, so it was a little difficult to see them. And I would like to have seen some information about the size of the work and the paper, etc. But I think the idea of creating a large body of work which speaks to this particular, you know, idea that he has is could be very impactful. And I think the images are great. The idea is great. He spoke about it well. He has a clear point of view again. I would like to see a little bit more about the community engagement part of the exhibit, like exactly where is he going to show it, when is it, how will the artwork be disseminated, just a more purposeful method of engagement. But I think that it's a great example of a project. I think it's well written and very specific, and I like the images as well. So.
Okay, thank you. Jay is our second reader.
Yeah, I definitely thought it was thoroughly described as well for the most part, and passionate too. And it looks like it'll be a logical progression. I thought the images on the resume were actually very consistent, same resolution. They came through well. I think part of the darkness potentially is just because the work is dark. But like if you did the zoom in on the images, you could get a great idea of what, you know, everything looked like. And then the notion that the applicant was going to engage the audience beforehand and allow the work to be shaped by those interactions, I think is really cool. And to the last comments, it would be nice to see specific galleries or the agenda on how it was going to continue to benefit the Indiana audience would be nice to see. So that's like not having the specific galleries lined up and shown, especially knowing that that can take months in advance to book galleries and stuff like that. But the finances seem outlined clearly and everything as well. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the panel? All right. Hearing none, please finalize your scores. Turn to application number 9, FY21 IAP Rousseau. Sarah is our first reader.
Hey guys, I feel strongly about this application. It's clear, it's direct, The artist seems to have her connections in place already. She has exhibited the experience to follow through with all that she's presenting and discussing. Clearly, it'll impact her career and future in a positive way. She has a solid presence already, it seems, in her art community. So there will be plenty of people who will be coming to her exhibits. So the public interaction, community interaction piece seems strong as well, as far as having attendance and people in which she can discuss this work with. I like that it has places where families are able to come rather than just, the adults, the typical, white box gallery. This seems to be more community minded in some of the places that she's discussing. Her work seems appropriate to her future goals. And overall, I feel like this is a really solid application.
Thanks, Sarah. Buffy is our second reader.
Okay, just to add to what Sarah was saying is I really felt like ongoing engagement is important from the beginning to make the public buy into making art, financing it through their tax dollars and supporting the arts through the purchase of some of the artwork. So the hands-on engagement process makes art more dear to the participants' hearts, and I also enjoyed her metaphor of layering her imagery to increase the meaning. So that fits into her idea of having her students in Montessori create their self-portraits. And hanging her work in a church is also an interesting option to increase her audience base. And I was just curious if she would have a comment box to be considered for public engagement in some places where possibly talking isn't something, or talking about artwork isn't something that happens in that space, as for instance in a church. For possible improvements, I was talking just about exploring feelings of a relationship to her environment through her images of the human figure. Her figures were inside of the chrysalis form, which is that birthing of a butterfly kind of form. So I thought that was an interesting kind of metaphor. I enjoyed that very much. That's all I had to say.
Thank you. Any additional comments from the panel?
I thought there's another example of the images being really good. Not just the quality of the work, but the way they were presented, the way they were shot, really clear. The other things that I was thinking on is if there was a way to, as the artist is examining the relationship with the environment, to get feedback from people before the work is fully finished. And maybe I missed that, but like maybe put out sketches and ask people how they feel about them, kind of to Buffy's point, how can that happen maybe a little bit beforehand even. And then another thing, I'm going to sound like a broken record on this, but the social media stuff, I think this would be an artist where it'd be really strong to get more social media presence. Like I did a Google search and I found her website, which is great. But the website would be something that I would even consider revisiting. And I think with all the artists that apply, and one of the suggestions that I would always put is that Wix, if artists aren't familiar with it, is an amazing tool for artists because you don't need to know any code. You can I don't know if I'm allowed to say a thing on here of like suggesting a platform, but it's just that they have, it's all visual. So you don't need any coding. You can do it to your style. You can start with a template, so you're not starting from scratch. But any artist that to be able to have a great website, like especially when it's so visual, that's a great tool. So those are my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Any others? All right, please finalize your scores on number 9. And we will move on to application number 10, FY21 IAP and I'm going to butcher this name, Smyrniotis. Our first reader would be Grace, and Grace is not here, so Sujata, you have the floor.
Great. Okay, so I thought that this artist had a really interesting idea about, the ideas about her work are really interesting. She wants to investigate deserted architectural structures, and she talks about urban decay and the environment. So I think that there's, for me, there's a very specific narrative, and I like the idea of it, the concept of it. The visual realization of how those narratives will take shape, to me, was a little bit vague, but there was some work that was attached to the application that I felt was very strong. Again, the supporting work was strong, but there were some duplicates, and so I would like to see a little bit more explanation about sizes, dates. Again, I keep saying this, and medium, because I couldn't really understand sometimes how big the work was, how small it was, what it would look like in an environment. But again, I think that I like her ideas. I think it was a very strong idea. And she is a mid-career artist. So I think that facilitating this work, this particular body of work at this time, would be very valuable to her. She talks about doing the Zygote Press and doing a series of prints, which I think works well with her idea. I had a little problem because there was no real clear method of disseminating the work to the public. So that was my only concern. But again, I think it's a strong application.
Okay, thank you. Any additional comments from the panel, please?
I had one where I'm backing up what Sujata said about the engaging the public, and I was just saying that I thought maybe if she could consider from the beginning where the public would be engaged, maybe a public forum discussion online with others' thoughts about the status between being rebuilt and demolished structures, what their status is as architecture. And in northern Indiana, I know there's a huge bunch of buildings that are halfway between being torn down, being utilized, and just being empty, cleanish spaces that would be something that could be used as their architecture exists now.
Okay. Any other comments?
She does clearly state that she's having a show at a particular gallery, and that she has a whole discussion on the show and how it will look and how she will engage her audience with the buildings that she's portraying in her new series of prints.
Okay, my
Thank you.
comment on that is that that happens at the end of the project as opposed to helping to form the concept. I mean, she's got a clear concept of what she wants to do, but input from the public was part of the IAC grant engagement process. And I was just trying to have her tie that in to make her grant stronger.
I see.
I agree with that too, Buffy. That was one of my notes, was that just a little bit in the beginning stages would have helped to make it a little bit stronger.
I can clarify too. I just wanted to, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. that we don't require that, it's not a requirement to engage before, but at some point, right, that that there's an active two-way meaningful ongoing engagement at some point in the project. So if y'all feel like your advice to her on opportunities for that is certainly welcome.
Sure.
I'd like to say that I envision storytelling happening at the show where the people who knew these buildings or worked in their buildings, or their grandfather worked in the building, or, you know, they've driven by it every day on their way to work for 19 years, or, you know, I've seen storytelling happen at shows before, and this is potentially a lovely opportunity for such discussions to happen.
I just wanted to say it's quite a big, some of the buildings you mentioned are a very big talking point in Fort Wayne at the moment. And that's where the exhibition is going to be held. So it's very credible that she's going to get a lot of people come to the exhibition with how the time frame is working out. And there should be quite a lot of engagement, but she could have done with mentioning that in the community section.
I totally agree with Frank. I think that that is one of the big parts of this particular application, is that she has a huge, what we call a big idea. And it is something that is very pertinent to right now.
Right. Any other comments, different or additional?
I had one more. I was a little bit confused on the like the projected cash income and the expenses. I don't know, maybe it was maybe it was my bad, but it just seemed like there was some things that didn't add up correctly. I don't know, maybe that was me, but I had a little bit of trouble understanding that. And maybe it was just because things were plugged into spots twice, and there's just a little bit of haze there for me. So
I agree with Jay on that one, and that was one of the panelists' recommendations that I had, was that in-kind donations can be confusing. They may be known in advance of the application. If they occur during the grant process, does the applicant need to record them and add them to their report?
Anything additional? Okay, please finalize your scores on application 10. All right. We'll move to application 11, FY21 IAP Starowitz. Our first reader is Jay.
Okay, Monumental Voids, I assume being the title of the project, a look at public space and memory is a set of art books featuring original works by Sean Starowitz. I think that the description could have gotten to the point a little bit quicker. I was a little bit confused to the impact it intends to have in civic stewardship and dialogue around the public space. I'm just going to read some of my notes. I think an example of the conversation as an example of the new meaning as it battles the complex and challenging environment would have made it more visceral. Something less conceptual that we could sink our teeth into. There was like just a lot of concept, but I couldn't completely follow. But again, that just might be my personal thing. I think that the breakdown of the goals and the pro forma for the funds outlined was spectacular. A lot of creative struggle with this side of the work, and I think it was done exceptionally well. So I think a lot of times, as creatives, we can't always outline it, but I think he did a great job there. I also think that more examples of the direct conversation the work intends to invoke could be provided to make it stronger. Think in terms of headlines, or the old 140 character Twitter limit. It just needs a more punchy elevator hook for me, just to like kind of get into it emotionally and understand it right out of the way. but I do think an enormous amount of detail about previous projects and the specific history was outstanding. So it seems like a solid development in the career path. I think overall a common thread of clarity and succinct message would really help change the tone. And this is something I said on another project that, you know, starting with why. There's a great YouTube TED Talk, Simon Sinek, on Start With Why. And I would suggest pretty much anybody in the world watch it, let alone artists. But, you know, the why of any project will help it make it more powerful to me personally. But I think there's a definite clear plan on the release and everything's thought through. So overall, strong work and good case made for this project.
Thanks, Jay. Our second reader is Sarah.
Hi, thank you. I agree with Jay that there was a lot of thought put into the project, that there's a lot of details, you know, like Rainbow Bakery and talking and presenting the book. The artist has clearly explained his reasons for believing that this work is beneficial to the public. He has clearly articulated his beliefs in an artist's job in the world at this time and place. These are all good things. Some of my feedback or my suggestions were to have some specifics rather than such a large overall idea. Details about what I am going to do rather than what I want to do or hope to do. I wasn't clear on if any of these things were actually plans or if it was just the artist thinking through what would be awesome. I understand that some of these things are dependent on the funding, but some of the questions I left in in the feasibility comments is this a plan? How many are you expecting in attendance? How many workshops? What's the final product look like? Is this a zine or a book? Who's going to do the binding? Is it hardcover, softcover? Are there essays, images? So some details on the artist's plan would be more convincing as a panelist on feasibility. I do like the idea that the book would continue to be available throughout, you know, anywhere in the world is some potential and that it could be mailed anywhere. I'm also curious if, because the artist has such a strong feeling about this being a public engagement and being really important to the conversation in the art world at the present time, does the artist intend on sending any of these publications to high schools or art centers or other places where young artists are studying and learning, as a follow-through on his strong passion for his idea about how artists should be engaging in the world at the time?
Okay, thank you. Additional comments from the panel?
Buffy, you're muted.
All right, sorry. I had one comment. Now I have to find it again. Oh, the idea of displaying his original works was an excellent precursor for inviting the public to a reading or exchange of idea event. and I too wished that I could have seen some finished images, like the more polished images that you usually see in a zine or even a graphic novel. It seemed like everything that I saw looked pretty rough.
Okay, any other comments?
I just got a suggestion. Having worked on illustrations and books myself quite recently, I think that it might be a bit below the estimate for how much it actually costs for someone to design the whole book. But not having all the information about what's going in it, it might end up paying more out of pocket than he's even written down.
Alrighty, thanks. If there are no other comments, please finalize your score on application 11. Application 12 is next. FY21 IAP Swartzentruber. Our first reader is Frank.
It's a very interesting application, bringing forward quite a unique background and viewpoint to the community with this book, which is good. And it's said about wanting to bring people together through understanding each other's cultures, which is good. He's got a very good background in sequential art, obviously, and he started off with the best at Disney. So he shouldn't have any trouble translating this into a graphic novel, which is good. He also demonstrated a desire to teach about it, which is always good. And he had some very interesting, when he said about his sources of people that he's looked to learn about sequential art, like Will Eisner and different artists, he's bang on the nose for some really good artistic direction. So overall good. With his timeline looked pretty good, his budget looked pretty good. He might want to look into other avenues of publishing as a backup, because it's not easy to get published by these famous graphic novel publishers. And it's quite easy nowadays to self-publish, especially with Amazon. It's very affordable and quite accessible to the whole world with Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing. So you might want to look into other avenues, but after he's tried the avenues that he's suggested for getting it published. And I like it that he's bringing diverse worldviews to people.
Okay, we don't have a second reader, so any comments from the panel that are additional or different than those already shared?
Yeah, I would like to add, being in that I use PC and the Adobe suite and all that for all of my work. Well, not all of my work, but a lot of my work. I think that all told, a great outline and great project. I think though that when it comes to building the computer, like, and in the cost section, you know, a great rig could be built that could handle what the artist needs for less than the $2,000. And, you know, then maybe some of that project cost could then be deferred into something like the Adobe suite for a full year, or, you know, other software and things that the artist might need. So, I mean, like, I just recently had a custom machine built for $1,800 that can, like, is way more intense than the artist would need specifically for this project. So I think that then the money saved on the actual rig could be then deferred into good software, because you need even if you have the best machine, if you don't have the right software for doing your projects, that was my only suggestion.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
good suggestion. Maybe a scanner too.
Yeah, actually, that might not be a bad idea either.
All right.
I had a couple of some feedback points. I agree with all the positive things that have been mentioned with the project. And a couple of my questions are, with whom will the diverse worldview dialogue be happening? And then it says that the book, well, that a lot of his engagement is required on getting this big contract and signed and interviews and public engagements, which are admirable and ambitious. And I'm wondering to whom the artist will be engaging the community if they don't get contracts and interviews. You know, so the feasibility factor, I'm curious as to more immediate local interactions that he can create without the need of such vast people being involved, you know, but just like local and immediate within the next 18 months, what might that look like? And then I was also confused on the timeline a little bit. It seems that there's in fact two separate timelines. One seems to be for the creation of the materials and the other is for work to be done in the event of getting signed or a contract. So clarity on that would also be helpful. And then finally, and maybe this was mentioned, it seems that the request is for a new computer and the applicant doesn't provide any details on what they're wanting to purchase or the model, or so I'm wondering or suggesting that evidence of that research would also make this a more concrete application.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? All right. Finalize your scores from application 12. Only 16 more applications to go. No, just joking. We only have one. And here it is, number 13, FY21 IAP Woods. Buffy, you're our first reader.
Okay. The project is to create an art book, and I agree with the premise of her ideas, Families, Creators, Artists, and Teachers Workshop in Louisville. It integrated the art activities into public art events accessible to all, and the description would be more explicit in detail to outline her product. Would it really be expansive or actually more concrete? I think she was talking in those terms. Her paintings have an interesting textural quality, and the final one has a bit of imagery that might spark conversation as to its meaning. She presents some wearable art that's presented visually on her Instagram page, but not in her, her documentation that was given with the grant. I had to go to her sites to get an idea of what it was that she was actually doing with the public. I'm intrigued by ideas that are presented and the listing of public events so far. Providing an idea of what would be represented in her book would help to determine its feasibility. The initial description contains a seed of a good idea. The artist did not iterate the idea fully, but more detailed information as to how the painting will help to break down barriers within a community of understanding are not really described. After viewing her event in Louisville, however, her meeting with local people to talk about what the perceived barriers are in creating art with them was enlightening to me. And it also enlightened the artist as a means to communicate her ideas. The video mentioned briefly is not mentioned again in her application. My guess is that it will be published online. So I found this particular grant a little bit confusing in its presentation. I wasn't sure what she was getting at, and I'm just not sure exactly what she intends to put in her book.
Okay. Sarah, is there a second reader?
Yes, hi there. I'm just reviewing the images again. I wasn't as unclear. I assumed that the images and some commentary is what I think I read in the application that would be in the book. Although I do find it a little extra challenging with abstract work and relating it to direct. And I know that that's a personal opinion, but I did find it to be thinking of the audience and how the audience would engage. I do enjoy the paragraph that she's discussing Q&A and curated guides and museum visits, not museum, but exhibit visits. But what I didn't find were any details of the publisher, timeframe, dates, and locations of the artist talks, confirmed printing dates, etc. So for a stronger application, I would have liked to see some very specific details, the who's, why's, when's, what's, where's, etc. I just have very vague, I just see very vague pricing and ideas.
Okay. Any other comments from the panel?
Yeah, I have a question about, you know, she says she's going to first debut the events in Indiana, Southern Indiana specifically, but she doesn't say, there are no specifics. So that's very vague to me. And it's also a little bit troubling that she lives in Louisville, which is not even Indiana. So I'm not really sure how this is going to be a grant that engages people in the state of Indiana specifically. And I would like to see some information about that.
Actually, Sarah, half of Louisville is in Indiana.
She does at least have an Indiana address, which is part of the Louisville metro area for sure, but she's at least eligible in that way.
I would echo.
Okay, sorry.
I would echo though that a lot of what's being said, that it's just there's a little bit of kind of haze and fog, and again, there's no why. If we could see more examples of how or even suggestions of how that goal might be done. One of the things that I had as a positive though is that the video helped me understand a little bit that was provided with the project, but I think pushing that even further, if there's a way to engage with the audience before and after and use video in some way, because that was one of the only things that got me a little bit closer to understanding and having a little bit more clarity on things.
Yeah, I would agree. I think seeing the video and seeing the comments about wanting to sort of encourage art in the communities that she works in, the different communities, sort of made it more clear to me too. The people she works with, I think her goal is to show that they can be an artist despite their background, and she shows this herself by her own career. I think that's what she's getting at. But like you said, it was very hazy until I watched the video.
I agree with
Excellent.
Frank on that. I think that the video is the strongest part of her application, and that is how she's talking about breaking down barriers between the public and this perception that only certain people get to be artists. Anybody can be an artist in her presentations, and that part of the paintings that she's doing and how she's showing people how she makes her paintings, and then doing tie-dye type of workshops if that's what she's also doing. Those kinds of things bring people to the table and break down those barriers. I'm just not sure about the book end of her request.
Okay, any other comments? All right, please finalize your scores on application 13.
Thanks for bringing up the eligibility question. That's certainly relevant. Appreciate it, Sujata.
Okay, everybody's done entering their final scores. This concludes the Individual Advancement Program FY21 Advisory Review Panel. The public meeting has now ended, and we'll say goodbye to the meeting guests at this time. This meeting recording will be posted on the program webpage in the coming weeks. Panelists, please stay online, and we thank you very much.